Hello, my friends. Let's start with the main point. The first day of negotiations has taken place, and the results show that Russia is holding its ground. Today, detailed information about the outcomes has emerged, and five main demands from Russia have been announced. Ukraine must adopt a neutral status, a complete ban on the deployment of foreign troops and weapons of mass destruction, a rejection of any demands for war reparations from Russia, recognition of the loss of Crimea and four other regions, withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from these territories and their transfer under Russian control, international recognition of all five regions as part of Russia. So we can see that all their goals they're trying to achieve militarily, they now want to secure through diplomacy, essentially asking the Ukrainian forces to retreat voluntarily and hand over land to Russia. However, the Ukrainian delegation made a statement that they are standing firm on their red lines and will not make concessions. The delegations also agreed that each side will present its own plan for a 30-day ceasefire. Following the meeting, an agreement was reached to exchange 1,000 individuals from each side as a trust building measure. They also agreed to provide the other party with written conditions that could lead to a ceasefire. In principle, both sides also agreed to meet again. But by now, it's safe to say that Russia only agreed to this in order to buy time and to keep Trump from imposing sanctions. And you'll see why in a moment. Medinsky himself openly admitted it, essentially revealing Russia's real plan. Listen carefully to his statement following the negotiations.
Right now, many are saying there should first be a ceasefire and only then talks about peace. That this is how it's always been, supposedly 30 or 60 days of truce, and only after that, discussions. But those who say this usually have no grasp of history. In reality, it's the other way around. As Napoleon said, war and negotiations always go hand in hand. Examples, sure. The Vietnam War for 15 years. The US and Vietnam negotiated right in the midst of combat. The Korean War, same thing. Talks took place against the backdrop of military operations. The Soviet-Finnish War, it's almost uncanny how history repeats itself. Stalin offered Finland peace. The British and French intervened. You can't make deals with the Soviets. We'll provide you with military aid. Send volunteer corps. But, of course, no one came. They told the Russians, fight to the last Finn. And in the end, military action continues. Negotiations happen at the same time, and only afterward does peace come. That's always been the case. War and talks go hand in hand. An even more striking example is the Great Northern War with Sweden, which lasted 21 years. Just a few years in, Peter I offered peace to the Swedes. He said, "We want nothing, just access to the Baltic, St. Petersburg, and some surrounding land for security." Security guarantees sounds very modern, doesn't it? The Swedes refused. Charles XII kept the war going, despite multiple peace proposals. And who supported him? That's right, Britain and France. They endlessly funded Sweden to keep the war going. Peace talks between Russia and Sweden began in 1718 on the Ulan Islands. But again, Britain and France intervened, stopped the talks, worked through us. It suited them to have two major powers bleed each other out in war. Those talks went nowhere, and only in 1721 did Sweden sign peace. But not under the terms of just St. Petersburg and its surroundings. Russia got a large part of Karelia, the Baltics, St. Petersburg, and more. And Sweden lost its status as a great power forever. Before the war, Sweden was a giant over 1 million square kilometers, and the Baltic Sea was practically its private lake. After the war, it lost land in northern Germany, the Baltics, and eventually Finland. History repeats itself. It's unclear why, but it repeats with astonishing consistency. Back then, time passed slowly. Now everything moves faster, but one thing stays the same. Bismarck, who spent many years as ambassador in St. Petersburg, learned Russian fluently and understood Russia deeply. He said, "Never try to deceive the Russians or steal from them, because time will pass and the Russians always come to take back what's theirs." That phrase rings especially powerful today.
Friends, it's now obvious that their plan is to drag out negotiations as long as possible. They'll pretend to agree to something, but all the while continue the war. And we can see that they are still moving troops and ramping up attacks, despite the fact that talks have already started. It's clear today that they are against a 30-day ceasefire. He stated it directly: the war and negotiations must go hand in hand. And at the same time, they supposedly agreed to submit the ceasefire plan and review Ukraine's. This just shows they're trying to make it look like everything is going smoothly for Trump's sake, so he doesn't impose sanctions or increase pressure. They basically count Trump down. The negotiations are technically happening, but the war will continue, and Russia has once again outplayed everyone. Everyone understands that the next round of negotiations may not happen for a few weeks, and when it does, Russia will take the Ukrainian 30-day ceasefire plan and then spend several more weeks reviewing it. This cycle will keep repeating for a long time, and in the meantime, Russia will have the opportunity to advance and capture more villages, maybe even a city. In this way, unfortunately, they are fully repeating history and trying to achieve total victory over Ukraine. Friends, be sure to share your thoughts on this in the comments. Europe is slowly starting to realize that Putin is playing them for fools, and they are now threatening sanctions, though we all know they probably won't make much of a difference anymore. Our top priority is a full and unconditional ceasefire. That's why we are stepping up the pressure to force Putin to come to the negotiation table. We are imposing tough sanctions against Russia, package after package. We want a just and lasting peace for Ukraine and strong security for all of Europe, said European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, speaking on her on behalf and on behalf of European Council President Antonio Costa. And now it's the right time to recall President Zelensky's statement, where he said that if an agreement with the Russians isn't reached, the European Union will impose sanctions that will only start showing real effects in about 12 to 18 months. So at this point, we can confidently say that the war is likely to continue for at least another year as we wait for Russia to weaken under the weight of those sanctions. Overall, the negotiation process is looking grim, and today Russian forces continue to push along the front lines, and we're gradually losing territory almost every day. So, let's briefly take a look at the current situation on the front. First, let's address those who believe Russia is already too weak and lacks the troops and equipment to conduct offensive operations. Today, a video went viral online from the Kherson direction showing Russians moving columns of equipment for a possible crossing of the Dnipro River. Friends, the attacks on the islands are indeed ongoing. Earlier reports mentioned a large number of boats that the Russians were gathering for the same purpose, crossing the river. They're also still actively using drones to target the right bank of the river and weaken the Ukrainian forces. So yes, Russia clearly has big plans and has no intention of backing down. It looks like this summer they may attempt to return to Kherson and reclaim territory previously liberated by the Ukrainian military. And since we've already started with the Kherson direction, let's now move on to the Zaporizhzhia direction. Here too, the Russians are stepping up the activity and appear to be planning a push towards Zaporizhzhia. For now, assaults are ongoing near Novoandriivka, Mali Sherbaki, and Stepove. In addition, shelling hasn't stopped and FPV drones are being actively used. However, there have been no changes along the front line over the past 24 hours. In the direction of Velika Novosilka, the Russians have reportedly taken control of Vilna Pole and already raised their flags. Still, as before, the Ukrainian side is in no rush to confirm any Russian advances. Today, there have been a large number of strikes near the village of Zelene Pole. It looks like the Russians will try to take this pocket soon as well. For now, no new assaults have been reported in that area. It appears they are still in the preparation phase. In the Kurakhove direction, assaults on the village of Bahatir are ongoing. Russian forces are pushing toward Oleksiivka, and battles are also taking place near Troitsk with an advance toward Kotlyarivka. The Ukrainian forces report that counterattacks have begun around Bahatir. Our forces are conducting small counterattacks in Bohatir. Not significantly successful yet, but Russians are dying in huge numbers. Honestly, there are so many of them, it's like they're everywhere, literally across the street from our guys. The Russians are trying to flank our positions from the east and are also pushing northward from the south, aiming toward the village center. There was also a drone strike on our positions in the built up area east of the village. The Russians are trying to seize this territory to get closer to the easternmost houses and push further into the northern area. Their plan is complete garbage, so even their camouflage ponchos at night don't help, and those Russians are about to get hit hard by heavy drops. The fighting remains extremely intense, and I wish our guys the strength to survive and hold their ground. The Russians are also slowly advancing toward the eastern part of Odradne, though so far we are managing to repel their attacks. Russian artillery and FPV drones are working with high intensity. Right now, they're focusing on disrupting our logistics, attacking rear areas, and targeting our reserves. Troops need to stay extra alert and not drop their guard. To put it bluntly, the situation is catastrophic, and the Russians are continuing to press hard. In the Pokrovsk direction, activity remains extremely high. There are more than 70 assaults per day, which once again proves that the Russians still have a massive amount of manpower and equipment. Armored assaults using tanks and infantry fighting vehicles continue near Novosergiyevka. Recently, video evidence confirmed these attacks, and for now, the Ukrainian forces have been able to destroy them. However, assaults are happening all along the front line, and the Russians are already entering the outskirts of Myrnograd and trying to establish a foothold in the city. The situation is very serious. In the Toretsk direction, attacks are continuing in Toretsk itself, near Krimsk, and assaults are underway on Delivka. The Russians are also pushing toward the villages of Zarya and Stara Mykolаivka. However, there have been no changes on the front line in the past 24 hours. Russian advances have stalled for now, although the attacks persist. In the direction of Chasiv Yar, the Russians continue to assault the central part of the city. They are also advancing toward Bila Hora and Deliyevka. Shelling remains constant and FPV drones are actively used. Despite this, there have been no changes over the last 24 hours. In the Siversk direction, the Russians launched single attacks on Grigorivka, Bilogorivka, and the area near Verkhnyokamensky. However, they didn't achieve any new success, and the front line remains unchanged. In the Lyman direction, Russian forces are assaulting the villages of Kolodezi, Zelena Dolina, Ridko Dub, Novy Mir, Olgivka, and Druzhelyubivka. Over the past 24 hours, there have been no breakthroughs, and for now, the Ukrainian forces have managed to halt the advance and successfully repel all attacks. In the Borova direction, the Russians have started pushing toward Borivska-Andreevka and continue to assault Bohuslavka and Novosergiyevka as before. So far, there have been no changes over the past 24 hours, but the activity remains high. In the Kupiansk direction, attacks have been minimal around the village of Pishane, and the front line remains unchanged. In the Dvorichna direction, attacks continue on Dovhenka. However, Russia has made no new gains and the situation hasn't changed over the past day. In the Kharkiv direction, the Russians have launched attacks, possibly trying to underscore their statement that they will capture Kharkiv and Sumy regions if Ukraine doesn't recognize four regions as Russian territories. Whatever that means, assaults have begun near the villages of Глибоке, Vysoka Yaruga, and Kudivka. So far, there have been no changes over the past 24 hours, but activity is increasing and attacks continue. Near Vovchansk, attacks also persist, though the front line remains unchanged. In the Sumy and Kursk directions, there is currently no heavy pressure on Sumy region. Attacks are recorded, but the front holds. From Russian territory, the Russians still haven't managed to push their Ukrainian forces out, and fighting continues. Based on these events, it's clear that the summer will be very active, with offensive actions increasing across all directions. There might even be more assaults on Sumy and Kharkiv regions. Friends, be sure to share your thoughts in the comments. And that's all from me. So please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.